Back to Yerushalmi Trumas. We are back Shvi. We are holding Daf 69a. Now we spoke about Ochal Achim and Ashniya. So if one person eats from that which is forbidden, and there's two people eat, then each case is a sofek. Now the Mishnah patted both of them of Karen V'Chomesh, even though one of them definitely ate truma. Right? We don't know what was truma or chulin, and one of them ate truma and one didn't. We don't know which one ate what. This is the view of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanila and Tamar. We've learnt in Taharis. Now this is talking about two paths. One is the Tahar path, and one is the Tameh path. And one person goes down, and we don't know which one he went. Then he touched things which are Tahar. The other friend went on the second path. He also touched things which are Tahar. So the question, each of them could have gone on the Tahar path or the Tameh path. So Rabbi Yehuda, the initial of Vas Achas, if they both ask the question at the same time, Tameh, then they're tameh because one of them is definitely tameh. But if they ask their din b'zeh chazeh tahirin, if they ask separately, then they are tahir. Each one can say, we can be matahir out of doubt. You probably went to the tahir path. Rabbi Yossi, he said bekach tamein. However they ask, they are tameh. One of them is tameh, so out of doubt, we have to treat them both of them as tameh, even if they ask their question separately. So according to Rabbi Yossi, then in that Mishnah, if one of them definitely ate from the truma, we would obligate both of them with the karen and the fifth. So it must be our Mishnah which patters is like the other view, which is Rabbi Yehuda. So he says, then the Gemara pushes that away and says, no, what are we talking about here? Where's the argument of Rabbi Yossi? Where they both ask the question together, so Tmein, then they definitely have to be Tamim. If they ask the question separately, it could be everyone holds their Tahirin. And look, the Kiyanan Kiyamin, what are we talking about? Where one person asks for himself and his friend. That is the question. How do we look at that? Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda says, look, just ask yourself and off you go. If you ask me, what is your din? I can say your tar. But don't ask me for you and your friend, right? Rabbi Yossi, he says, it's like both of them coming together. You're asking about both people. It's as if both of you are coming together, and then I have to say tameh. But in the case in our Mishnah, is it not like a case? It's not like they're coming together. Basically, he one ate. This one ate this thing. This one ate that thing. They're not coming together. So here, even Rabbi Yossi could agree they're both potter from Tashlumim. Now we said if we do not know which one was the truma, which one was cholin, and you went and sowed one of them, or zara acher or someone else sowed from the second box, you're possible. If one person sowed from both, if it's the seeds that disintegrate, is mutter. If the seeds don't disintegrate, then it's forbidden. Rav Zeir of Shem Rav Chia Bavo, V'hu zara esashnia. Now, if the second one sowed the second box, before the first one was cut. Here, the Mishnah forbids it, with seeds which don't disintegrate, because both boxes were sown and growing together at the same time. Therefore, there has to be truma there, and the gidulin, the growths, are forbidden. But in zares hashnia, if, however, the second one sowed his mixture, after the first one had been cut, they don't join up to definitely say, oh, there's definitely a mixture here. No, we look at the talosh, we look at what's detached separately and what's connected to the ground separately. And each one is only suffix truma, and therefore any growths are permitted. Chananya Tirtaya, B'Shem Reb Yanai. Chananya Tirtaya said, Basel shel truma, she'akarai u'shesale. So you've taken an onion of truma, you uprooted it, and then you planted it again, and it's got new additional growths. When the growths now are the majority, which is like chulin, the new growths are chulin. So when they are more than the original onion that was sown, mutter, then the onion is permitted. Because the gedule heta, the growths of heta, nullify the issa of the original onion. Okay? The Bavli in the Darim learns, it doesn't mean a truma onion, because then the growths are anyway forbidden. He says, talking about an onion which grew from an onion of truma, and you detached it and sowed it again. It's gedule truma, but the growths that come from it are gidule gedulin. They're growths of growths. Yeah, they can have a power to be mevatel the prohibition one. Okay. Hasi Rav Zira. Rav Zira asked, Martanina, we learned in our Mishnah, if someone went and sowed both of them, if the seeds disintegrate, it's okay. If the seeds don't disintegrate, also it's forbidden. Now, the case where the seeds disappear and it's permitted, is that the new growths are nullifying what was there already. The seed has disappeared. So the same case in the Mishnah, also, where it's forbidden, where the seeds don't disintegrate, in that situation, even though the new growths of more, we don't say the growth of heter mevatel the isul, and that's not like Rav Yanai, where we say that the new growths nullify it. That's a very good question, and there is no answer. Rav Zira, he was the one who asked on Rav Yanai. He wanted to prove gedulei heter do not nullify the isul, kedate, like what he holds elsewhere. Rav Zira b'shem Rav Yochanan, he says, "Batzal shel klaya kerem." You got an onion of klaya kerem, of forbidden mixtures in the vineyard. She'akra, you've uprooted it. She'solai, and then you planted it outside the vineyard, and it carried on growing beheter. Afilu haisif kama, even if it grew a bit more, also it is still forbidden. She'ein gedulei isul mevmalin isul. The growth of the isul do not nullify that which is also. So the Rishonim actually have a question how to understand this. According to the Ran, Rabbi Yonasan holds even the growths themselves are forbidden. They came from Davar Osul, so they're not Mavata the Ikka. According to Tosfos, the growths are permitted, but they can't nullify the forbidden bit. Okay, our sugi is mashma like the Ran. We're learning according to Yukar of Zira, the Gedolim, the growths are Osul if it doesn't disintegrate, and even though the growths are more than the Ikka, it seems. Okay. Adon Alach, Hayachal Truma. Okay, so now apart from the fact that the Cohen is permitted to eat truma, the Torah allows various other people who are connected with the Cohen to eat truma. That's the Cohen's wife, even though she's not a bas Cohen, he's Eved Kanani. Now these people can eat truma while they're connected to the Cohen. When that chain breaks, then they're also to eat truma. So we're talking about cases where the chain broke between people with the Cohen, and because they didn't know their position, they ate truma, not knowing that they're no longer allowed to eat it. And the Mishnah will also talk about someone who, as far as he knows, all his life he thinks is a Cohen. He ate truma, and then he finds out there was a problem in his lineage, and he's puzzled from eating truma. So let's see. A woman who was eating truma, she was the wife of a Cohen, permitted to eat truma, and then they say, I'm afraid her husband's died, and she's got no kids, right? So if her husband died and he has no kids, she can't eat truma anymore. You've been divorced, right? How about that for news? You've been divorced today. And therefore she ate truma be'isur. Eved Kanani is eating truma. They say, you know what? The master's died. Meis Ravcha, and Yisrael has inherited you now. He sold you to Yisrael, and he gave you as a gift to Yisrael. He's made you free. So you ate truma be'isur. Cohen is eating truma thinking he's a kosher Cohen, and he finds out, and he's ever apostle from eating truma. He ate it be'isur. Rebbe Lezer obligates these people to pay tashlumin of keren b'chomesh, just like Yisrael eating truma b'shegig. Rabbi Yeshua paid that. Yeshua says no, he doesn't have to pay.
Yes, he doesn't pay the chomesh, but to pay the keren.
We'll see. Rabbi Yeshua patters. He says here, the Gemara will explain what the view of Rabbi Yeshua is. We'll see. Rabbi Yeshua paid it. Now, yeah, okay. Now, what about karbonas brought through someone who we knew was a Kohen Kasher, then we find out he's puzzle. So if he's a Kohen who's now serving the base Mikdash, I made a makriv, Agam Mizbech, but Noida, and we find out Shu Ben Gurusha Ben Chalutza, so it's possible karbonas. All the karbonas from day one are forbidden because he's a chalal. Rabbi Yeshua allows it. Now, if he brought karbonas, I thought he's kosher, but neither shul mum. If he finds out he's got a blemish, then everyone holds avodah p'sul, and avodah is no good. And what about someone who couldn't eat truma? After he put the truma in his mouth, he finds out he can't eat truma, but he's already put it in his mouth. So what's the din now? What does he do with it if it's in his mouth? But Kula, all these mentions of wife of a Cohen, Eved Kanani, who can't eat truma, if the truma was in their mouth, they can swallow it, because when you put it in your mouth, beheta, you can keep it in your mouth. Rabbi Yeshua says, chuck it out. You can't swallow it. Now, a Kohen eating truma, but Amrullah, they said, it's mesa. No, you're tameh, you can't eat truma. But it's truma. Or they said to him, the truma is tameh now, you can't eat it. Rabbi Lezer Yivla. Again, Rabbi Lezer says you should swallow it. Like before. When in your mouth, beheta, you can swallow it. Even though now it's a problem, but when it went in your mouth, it was allowed to go in. Rabbi Yeshua Yiflo. Again, Rabbi Yeshua says you should chuck it out and spit it out. Now, what about someone who finds out, after he's put the food in his mouth, that he was never really permitted to eat it at all? So he's got truma in his mouth, huh?
You realize how funny this is?
Yeah, he's got truma in his mouth.
He shows the one
and
who
they
said
said
that is potter, yet he should be violent.
Yeah, he says they can check it out.
When Rabbi Lezer is the one who says is
and he says you can swallow it. Because they look at different ideas. Here the idea is you ate it beheta. So Rabbi Lezer says, well, you ate it beheta, you can keep it in your mouth. Now let's see. We're going to talk about a person who finds out he's put the food in his mouth and he finds out he was never allowed to eat it. A Cohen has truma in his mouth. They say, Tameh Ayisa, you were Tameh before you started eating the truma. You should never have eaten it. But Tameh Ayisa truma, the truma was Tameh before you started and you shouldn't eat it. Or Manaida Loishul Tevel, you find out it's Tevel. Or Maserishan, or ladies eating Maserishan, Shalainid, or Chumasi, where the trumas mass hadn't been taken. Or Masechet Hekdash, Shalainid, which weren't redeemed, and you couldn't eat it. Hekdash, where it is, Masechet outside of Shalain. Oh, Shatam, Tam, Pishpesh, or you had truma in your mouth. Oh, listen to this. And you taste some sort of insect, some despicable insect in your mouth, the turpib in your mouth. So there's this insect mixed up with the truma in his mouth. In all these situations, hareza yifla, you should spit it out. You can't swallow it. These foods are forbidden even before you started eating them. So according to everyone, you're not allowed to swallow it. You have to spit it out. Pishmish is some sort of red insect, which you can't find in the walls and in the beds. A bed bug, perhaps, I don't know. Morris ma'id. So all these things were forbidden before you put in. Some say the insect is already mashed up. It's mixed with the truma through you chewing it together. And it's batel barov. But still you have to spit out what's in your mouth, because maybe it's still not mixed with the truma, maybe it's still separate. Some say even if the insect is already mixed up with the truma through your chewing, it's batel barov, as we said. But because it's so mius, you're allowed to spit it out. We don't say, oh, you're wasting truma now, because you're spitting out the truma, you see? So you're allowed to spit it out. Right. Hareza yifla. So we said what? You should spit it out. Okay. A woman's eating truma and then they say the husband's died. Or she's been divorced. She ate truma be'issa b'shogig. Rules says she has to pay care of the chaymish. Rabbi says no. I understand if the husband died. So it could be she never knew. She ate truma. But if she was eating truma and they say, Gersha, you've been divorced. I mean, a woman only gets divorced when the get reaches her. So how is it she's eating truma? She didn't know she was divorced. So Gemara explains, it's talking about a case where the get's coming not to her, it's coming to her father. And he's going to explain now, how can it be she was permitted to eat truma because she was the wife of a Cohen and the father can receive the get? Rabban and Amrin, they answered like this. We're talking about a case called Mishnah Rishonah, like the first view of the Chachamim. Shekain, according to the first view, a woman who is engaged, Arusa Bas Yisrael, the original view was Eicheles b'truma. If she's engaged, she can eat truma. We're not worried, mezaneh, whatever, this and the other. No, it's not like Bavli, right? Arusa Bas Yisrael, Eicheles b'truma. She's engaged, she can eat truma. As long as she's a nara, Aviyah mekabel es gita. Until 12 and a half, the father can receive the get. So we can explain some of our case where the original psak was that Bas Yisrael engaged to a Cohen. She's permitted to eat truma, according to the Mishnah Rishonah, and she's divorced because the father receives the get and she didn't know that she was divorced. So that's all very well, according to the original din, that yes, a Bas Yisrael engaged to a Cohen can eat truma. Rebbe Lazaimer, he said, I feel it to him Mishnah Achrayna. It can even be like the Chachamim who say that Bas Yisrael engaged to a Cohen can't eat truma. So how do we fit in the case? Tifto, to my case, Sha'amraloi, she told her shliach, receive for me a get in a certain place. And when the shliach receives the get in that place, she is divorced. So here, according to the Tanakh, she's permitted to carry on eating truma until the time it would take to reach the get to that place that she has referred to, right? So she can carry on eating truma. And she thought, right, it will take maybe 10 days for the shliach to receive the get. But the husband found a fast horse. He brought it there in 5 days. The shliach received the get after 5 days. So she is now divorced by receiving the get through the shliach after 5 days. She thinks she's got another 5 days, right? She thinks it will take 10 days. So she's eating truma for the 10 days. So this situation where she's eating truma beheta, and they say, you've been divorced, she didn't know about it, so she ate truma b'shogeg, be'isul. He says, surely the explanation of the Amoy Rabbi Lezer was also said to explain the Tana Rabbi Lezer during our Mishnah. Now Rabbi Lezer in our Mishnah is based on the Tana Kama and Gittin, and the Tana Rabbi Eliezer argues on it. The Taninan, we've learnt about a wife of a Cohen who said, receive for me a get in so-and-so place. Rabbi Lezer, I said miyad. The Tana Rabbi Lezer holds, I'm saying, well, she says receive it in that place. From now, she can't eat truma. Why? Because maybe something changed and maybe she got the get. If you're going to tell me we can't explain our mission like this, because according to Rabbi Lezer, she's not allowed to eat truma straight away. So she ate truma be'isul. So Gemara gives a case where even according to Rabbi Lezer, it could be she can still eat truma beheta without knowing that the shliach has received the get. He says, well, Rabbi Lezer, does Rabbi Lezer not agree? Shemamra, if she says to a shliach, Al tekabali giti elav b'makom, don't receive a get from me except in that place. In such a case, she can carry on eating truma. She can until the get reaches there. She can carry on eating truma all the time it takes to that place. Right? So we could say our Mishnah talking about Eishes Cohen. She tells the shliach, and he's waiting the get should reach in that place after 10 days. The Ma'aseh, he was successful to bring it in 5 days when he received the get. So she was divorced by the shliach after 5 days, but she thought it will take 10 days. So she ate truma all those 10 days. So even according to Rabbi Lezer, she was eating truma beheta, and then they come along and say, well, actually, you're divorced. And she didn't know about it. So it comes out she ate truma be'issa b'shoigig. You follow? She thought it was going to take 10 days to 5 days. But when she tells the shliach how to come and get it, only receive the get in that place. And usually it takes 10 days. As if she said to him, shouldn't be a get until 10 days. That's what she's saying. If usually it takes 10 days, then her wording could mean the gerushin should not be chal until after 10 days. Even if the fact the gets there a bit earlier, it will still be 10 days. So it comes out Masha Achla, what she ate from the truma before the 10 days were up, but Het Achla, she was permitted to do so.
But that's like saying she has the right to do it with Sarif.
Well, she doesn't receive it. You're right, it is al kocha, but whatever. She's saying she wants to receive it in this manner. Now it comes out, we can't explain our Mishnah where she got the get through a shliach. Mostly she got the get through her father. Since the father's get only from Erisin, maybe it's like the Mishnah Rishoda, like the first view. The Basi Sholim Morasis to Cohen is allowed to eat truma. That was the Mishnah Rishoda. But now if a Cohen's eating truma, he thinks he's a Cohen. And then he finds out he's a ben Grusha or ben Chalutza, who's not allowed to eat truma. Rabbi Lezer says, right, he has to pay care of Chaimish, Rabbi Shua says he doesn't. Now Rabbi Shua Paskad, 3 people ate truma, we think they're permitted, it turns out they're not, they're possible from paying truma. So Rabbi Chagai Sholach Habra, he asked the Chachamim, Minai la'echol b'shus. How do I know if you eat truma with permission? Right, and it turns out you shouldn't have eaten it. Shu Pata, you don't have to pay tashlumin. Right, surely the reason of Yeshua who passes tashlumin in 3 cases was these people ate it, but cheskas they thought they were permitted to do so. So they're not shogeg, they're anus, yeah, and they're passing from paying tashlumin. But in the 3rd case, Ma ben Savel, what's the difference between Yisrael who thinks she's chulin, but it's true, it turns out it's truma that the Yisrael is chayev, shu chayev, And Ma'abein, what's the case of someone who Cohen, or someone who thought he was a Cohen and he ate Truma and it turned out Nimsa Yisrael? Turns out he's a Chalal. What difference does it make? If a Zar has to pay Tashlumin, like a Zar, a Cohen who's a Chalal also pays Tashlumin. Should be who Patel with Tashlumin, right? So according to be sure, why is he Patel from Tashlumin here? In both cases, these people were never permitted to eat Truma. They eat Truma b'Shogeg, just like we obligate Kerem L'Chomesh to Yisrael who eats Truma b'Shogeg. You think it's Chulin? We should obligate payments to a Cohen who's a Chalal who ate Truma b'Shogeg. He thinks he's a good Cohen, and it turns out he's not. So Gemara says, why a Chalal thinking he's a Cohen? Why is he like Oros and he's Pater from Tashlumin? Amrilei, the Chachamim said to Rav Chagai, there's a big difference between Yisrael who ate Truma b'Shogeg and a Cohen who ate Truma and found out he's a Chalal. Because a Cohen is b'cheskas kosher is not possible. Truma only meharayas based in it. You need a psak. When the based in paskan, he's a Chalal. If they've not sat down to paskan, he's b'cheskas kosher, and he's permitted to eat Truma. So Rabbi Yeshua tells us in our Mishnah, Cohen ate Truma b'cheskas shu Cohen kosher. He thought he's a Cohen. Even if later on found he's a Chalal, when he ate the Truma, he was still cheskas kosher. He's not shogeg ala anus. He's part of tashlumin. If he eats Truma b'isur b'shogeg, he was never permitted to eat Truma. He's not an anus. He's a shogeg and he's chayav in tashlumin. Okay, so he's saying it depends on whether the basin have reached a psak on this case or not. Rav Chagai said to the Chachamim, another day and I still have this problem. What's the difference between Sava Shulchan? He thinks it's a weekday and he slaughters an animal, but it's the Shabbos. It turns out it's Shabbos today. Shulchan, let's bring Chatas. Sava, what's the difference between someone who thinks he's shechting Erev Pesach, and it's Erev Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, and it's a Shabbos. Now he's allowed to slaughter a Korban Pesach on Shabbos, if it's Erev Pesach. But it turns out, although he slaughtered on Erev Pesach, which fell on Shabbos, he ended up slaughtering a shlamim, minim to shlamim. Now, according to be sure, he's potter from bringing a chatas. And in both situations, you slaughter an animal b'shogeg b'Shabbos. So just like you slaughter b'Shabbos b'shogeg, you think it's a weekday, you have to bring a chatas. So also, we should be mechayev a shochet b'Shabbos b'shogeg because he thinks it's a Korban Pesach. It turns out shlamim. To bring it, we should obligate him to bring a Korban Chatas. Why does he not have to bring a Chatas when he slaughters a Shlamim on Erev Pesach, Shechal B'Shabbos? So he says, I understand, according to Yeshua. Erev Pesach, Shechal B'Shabbos, the animal, you thought it's Korban Pesach, it's a Shlamim, you don't have to bring a Chatas. So why? Amrele, they said, there's a difference between Shechting B'Shabbos B'Shogeg, you think it's a weekday, or Shechting B'Shabbos, you think it's a Korban Pesach. He says, Shachting b'Shabbos b'Shogeg, you think it's called Pesach, you did have an entitlement to shecht. Not for this animal, not for this korban, but at least another korban. Shechet b'Shus. Now this is called Terumot Daf mitzvah. You did have a reason for a mitzvah to make a mistake. You thought this was a Pesach, and it wasn't. Now Shchitas Korban Pesach is a mitzvah. You thought you're doing a mitzvah. Therefore, be sure patters you from Korban Chatos. According to him, a Terumot Daf mitzvah, you've done a malach b'Shabbos, you're potter from a Korban Chatos. Okay? So that's what he says, because we have this, you'll find this a lot in Masechet Shabbos, where you have the two children that needed bris milah, and one was born Shabbos, one was born Sunday, and the Mishnah there, the Gemara seems to think the Mishnah's gives us a difference what we have. Anyway, it's another thing, we'll come to that. So that's, this is the idea of Shochet b'Shus. You did have a reason to do what you were doing, but you still made a mistake. Right, the Babli talks about Terumot Daf mitzvah. It says with the chatos of Avodah Zarah, Torah achas yasel yelachem la'isa b'shkaga. Torah achas all chiyuvei chatos are compared to Avodah Zarah. Which Yeshua we learn dafka b'shkaga where there's no mitzvah. Like shogeg of Avodah Zarah, there was no mitzvah. You're chayav chatos. But if there was a tos b'dvar mitzvah, you're not chayav chatos. And some explain the get of the patur. It's not proper shogeg. It's Korban Eines. It's closer to Eines because you thought there was some mitzvah aspect to what you were doing. Okay? Now, Rav Chagai says, I've got another din I need to work out. Ma ben sava shul shuman. What about you have meat? You think it's permitted meat, kosher meat, and you eat it. And then it turns out it's forbidden fat. Shul chayav. You have to bring a chatas. Ma ben sava, what's the difference? You thought about meat, shul also that you can't eat it, and you ate it. And it turns out you thought you can't eat it. but you ate it. And it turns out you're permitted to eat it. You thought it's chaylev, but you decided to eat it. And it turns out it's kosher meat. Shu pasi, you're bringing a chatas. You don't have to bring a chatas. Why? Even though there you also need forgiveness. You still ate something which you thought had a kavanah, you thought you were doing wrong. So both cases, you need a kapara. Just like if you eat issa b'shogeg, you have to bring a chatas. So we say if you eat a heter thinking it's asur, you should bring a chatas. Very good question. Lo agivune. They didn't answer it. Amal and Rav Haggai said, Chachamim nimlachin minan. Let's look into it. Maybe we can answer it. It says in the Torah of the Pasha of Nasi, he finds out about his sin and he brings a korban. A sinner, hashav midiyasa, who was refraining from doing the action, had he known it was forbidden, then a chayiv has to bring a chatas, ashigasa, yatsa, as opposed to zeh, someone who does a permitted action, thinking it's forbidden, shafilu yodea, even if he knows from the beginning the truth that it's permitted, ain't a poish, he would not refrain from doing it, because it's heter, right? And there's nothing stopping him from eating it. Had he known it, he thinks it's also, but had he known it was heter, he would have eaten it. There'd be no reason. So he says this person, if he knows the truth that it's permitted, he would not refrain, because it's heter. This person does not bring a korban chatas. After that, Rabbi Yossi went to the Beis Medrash. He heard what was asked of Chachamim, and he said to the Chachamim, why did you not tell him? We can answer the question. A person finds out about his sin and then behaving, then he brings a korban. The Chachamim answered back, who kashaite? Rav Haggai asked this question, who came and he actually answered it based on this drasha. Right? It says, you find out about your sin, you bring a korban. If you never did anything wrong, there's no korban to bring, right? You may have thought you were doing something wrong, but it turns out you weren't. It was heter all the time. So you don't have to bring a korban, such a thing. If a Cohen is doing avodah, he thinks he can do it. Then he turns out he's ben Rusha ben Chalutza. He can't do the avodah. Rabbi Lezer says anything you did there until now is all possible. Rabbi Shua says no, it's okay. Now, what's the source of Rabbi Shua? Three drashos with Truma Shem B'Chuvarim B'Torah. It's clear in the Psukim. It says in the Torah and B'Kurim. You come to the Cohen, will be in those days, right? It's a person. You'll come to the Cohen, and it's talking about someone, a Cohen who will be in those days. It's someone who is now a Cohen, but then he'll stop being a Cohen. Is there a Cohen who's a Cohen now? He's not a Cohen later on. Who is that? Who is it? How can it be? Bring karbanos, and it turns out he's a ben Grusha ben Chalutza. Right? According to Bishua, that pasuk tells me Shavadasa Kashera. His avodah is kosher. Rav said, he's learned from a pasuk. It says Baruch Hashem Chelai Ufal Yadav Tirtzeh. Yeah, which is in V'zay Sabracha. Chelai is an expression of Chalal. So we learn also his work, his Pal Yadav of a Chalal is accepted. From here, Rabbi Shua learned Kosher Mizarish of Levi. If we know it comes from Levi, even though we know it's a Chalal, Avaydasa Kashera, his avodah is kosher. Al Da'ate the Rav, according to Rav, Rabbi Shua learned his din, that you bring Karbanos and Mizbeach from Baruch Hashem Chelai, and it's all accepted. Mevad v'Kohen Makrib, there's only a Kohen it's his turn, he's in the rota that day. If he's not from the Mishmah, his Karbanos are not kosher. Al Da'ate Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan, they learned that the Kohen will be in those days. Afilu Kol Kohen, any Kohen who brought Karbanos in these days, who's not from the Mishmah, he'll be accepted. Also, according to Rav, that we learn this din Baruch Hashem Chelai, Dinur Yeshua is Bilvad B'Kadshei Mikdash. Only Kadshim in the base of Mikdash, right? Karbanos that he brings, but not for Bikurim or Truma he ate. This pasuk is talking about Kadshei Mikdash, right? Yasimu Ketzera Ba'Pecha, right? Chadil HaMizbechecha. Adated Rav Yochanan, that Rabbi Yeshua learned this din, the Kohen will be in those days, it means Afidu Kadshei Agvul, even Kadshim outside the base of Mikdash, like Bikurim or Truma. This pasuk is said in the Torah, in the Pasha of Bikurim. Al Da'ate the Rav, according to Rav's view that Rabbi Shua learned his din Baruch Hashem Chelai, then the din is Olvad B'Shas Mikdash. At the time the base of Mikdash is around, bringing Karbanos at the time of the base of Mikdash, they'll be accepted. According to Rabbi Yochanan's view, you learn from the code will be in those days, I feel even nowadays after the Churban. Because this pasuk is said in the Torah Pasha Bikurim called Truma. Truma can be eaten even after the Churban. Therefore, this drosha was said even about the Tkufa after the Churban. Yeah, not just at the time of the Beit Mikdash. Because nowadays we can't eat Truma. But there was a time after the Churban where they were still able to be Tahar and eat Truma. Now, Bishua Paskad, a Kohen who brings Karbonos, thinking that he's kosher, and it turns out he's a halal, the Karbonos are kosher. What does Rabbi Yeshua say if we find out he's a halal in the middle of the avodah? Rabbi Yirmiyah does Rabbi Yeshua allow avodah, which is done, thinking he's kosher, before he was a halal? What about the continuation of the carbon? So in a situation where he finds out he's a halal in the middle of the avodah, can he carry on? Because the first jobs were done permitted. Can he carry on? For example, Mekabel, he receives the blood, and he finds out it's a halal, and then another Cohen is sprinkling. Can another Cohen carry on and sprinkle this blood? Or Kohen, he's taking a fistful of the flour offering, thinking he's a kosher Cohen. We find out he's not. But can another Cohen offer this on the Mizbeach? And then Moilek, if he is using his nail to cut the bird's head, thinking he's a Cohen kosher, and we find out he's a halal. Acher Mazeh, is another Cohen allowed to sprinkle that on the Mizbeach? Rabbi Yaakov is Dr. Shem, Rabbi Yitzchok, Mimad Tanya, which we learned in a Brisa, but a Cohen who does avodah on the Mizbeach, he didn't know he's a halal. Also, we treat the avodah that he did, kechatzas gazula, like an animal of chulin which was stolen and brought to the chatas, gzela, lachet b'shogeg, shalai noida l'rabim, a chatzas gazula, which the rabbim didn't know about. Basically, it was stolen, and they offered it up. Shehi mechaperes, it's a kapara for the gazlan. He doesn't have to bring another one, and that's because of tikkun ha'olam, a special tikkun ha'olam. So similarly, we treat the avodah of the karbonos that a Kohen does before he found out he's a halal, and they said the karbonos are kosher, right? Now, a chatzas which is stolen, which we don't know about, even if we know it's stolen, in the middle of its work, you're allowed to complete the avodah and sprinkle the blood. So Hadar Amra, this tells me that in our case, Shuhu Mekabel, he can receive the blood in Klei Sharis, thinking he's a Kohen kosher. He finds out he's a halal. Another Kohen can continue the avodah. V'zoyer can sprinkle on the mizbeach. Kohen, he can take the fistful, thinking he's a Kohen kosher. Then he finds out he's a halal. Then everyone else can carry on and magtir and bring the fistful on the mizbeach like a mincha kashera. And also Moilek, he can do malika on the bird, knock off the bird's head, thinking he's a Kohen kosher, and he finds out he's a halal. Someone else can carry on or mazeh and sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach like a kosher carbon. So the Brisa tells you, we equate the avodas of the karbonos that Kohen does before he was a halal, to avodah the Kohen with a chatzas gazula, which we don't find out about, that someone else can sort of carry it on. Okay? Right. He says here that Yerushalmi and the Bavli bring two explanations. He says, Agamara holds, within Torah, and a chatas which is stolen is not a kapara for the gazman. Because the gazman didn't acquire the animal, he can't make it a kadosh and offer it up. So he doesn't really have forgiveness. But the Chachamim said, if we don't know about the gazela for the rabbim, the chatas which is stolen is a kapara for the gazlan, because we don't want the kohenim to be sad that they ate meat of Isur from an animal which wasn't holy. Right? If it's not a korban, it's chulin, which was slaughtered in the Azara. So the Kohen, we said, what, we ate chulin initially of Azara? So the Kohen said, no, we will treat it as a proper korban. And we don't want them otherwise to refrain from bringing korbanos, not to cause people to stumble, therefore be bottom. So therefore they said, in this situation, the chatos is a kapara, he doesn't have to bring another one. Even though within Torah, he's not fulfilled his chiyuv of his chatas through the stolen animal. But the Beis Din have a kach to be oikem in our Torah, but shev al taseh when they saw need. And that's why the Masechet, the chatas kazula is a kapara for the gazlan. Right? He doesn't have to bring another one. Because we don't want the kohenim to be sad. We always think of the kohenim, Rabbi Sad. Very important to think about the kohenim. And therefore we don't want the kohenim to be sad. Okay. Let's carry on. One who kills b'shogeg, One who kills b'shogeg has to go into Golus of one of the cities of refuge. Now he has to stay till the Kohen Gadol dies. The Kohen Gadol that was around when he did his crime, right, when he killed b'shogeg. Now, if the time when he's Chaim Golus, there was no Kohen Gadol in place, then he never leaves the city of refuge forever. He only goes out when the Kohen Gadol who was around at the time of the psak, of the Beis Din, and he has to run to the city of refuge. If there's a Kohen Gadol around then that Kohen Gadol dies, he goes out. Now, what about according to Yeshua, where after his Chayav Golus, we find out, you'll love this question, we find out that the Kohen Gadol who was in charge was a Chalal all along. And he's possible for Kuhana. Does this man get out of the town or not? Rav Yaakov Azad Hashem Rav Yitzchok Shah. He went into Golus for Gola. But Noida Shakain Gadol Ben Gusha Ben Chalos that the Cohen was puzzled all along. How do we treat this murderer? He's Chaim Golus before maybe there was a Cohen. Was there a Cohen in place at the time or not? Well, we find out it was puzzled. Is it Kamishu Mace as if now the Kohen Gadol dies? The Yasser is Technik Kohen, the murderer can go to his own town. Or maybe Kimish Minik Ba'adinai. Maybe it's like his din is there, but Shaloi Kohen Gadol. At the time when there was no Kohen Gadol, therefore only gets Misham La'olam. Maybe there was no Kohen Gadol in place, therefore he can never leave. Nishmeina Minhada, we learn from the following. Masechet b'Magores, there was a well of water or pool, which was a mikvah tara, shel discus, of someone called discus. B'Yavne. You think it's a valid mikvah. You think it's got 40 sa. That's what we thought. They go in it thinking it's shalit. And after a period of time, Nifgamai lost some of its water. The Nimdada, and it was measured when Nimsa Chaseri. It turned out it was lacking 40 sa. When did it start losing its water? When did it become possible? What about all the tummy vessels that have gone in meanwhile? What happens to the people that have soiled in there? Was the mikvah still kosher at that time? Or, well, we see now it's been lacking a bit. Maybe it was considered lacking. Retav and Matay, all the Kalim and the people. Rabbi Kiva Matame. Rabbi Kiva says they're all Tameh. Look, the mikvah was fine. In the beginning, there was enough water. It remains tahor until you know for sure, today, you find it empty. Therefore, until today, it was fine. Rabbi Kiva Tameh says this keli, you want to say, well, the keli was tameh. You want to change it by putting it in that mikveh? Who says? The keli was known to be tameh. It remains tameh until you know that it's tameh. Therefore, the kelim, or the people who are tameh, who went into the mikveh, are still mikvehs lacking water, they're all tameh. Now, each of the Tanoim compare this to the case in our Mishnah. Rav Tarfon, Lama Zedomus. Rav Tarfon said everything is tar. Why? He said, what does he compare to? The Kohen Gadol is Ayman Makru Gamizbech, he's doing Avodah, but so we find out there's a problem in his lineage. So according to Yeshua, everything's done is fine. Avodah Sekashera. So here as well, yes, the mikvah is lacking now, but one who tovels in it, we didn't know about lacking, we treat it as tar. Rabbi Kiva says no. Lama Zedomus wants to compare Ayman Makru Gamizbech. He's offering on the Mizbeach, thinking he's a Vada Kohen, but no, we find it's a blemish. All the avodah is that is a problem. So in our situation, now the mikvah's chaser, we assume it was chaser all along, and everything that you tobled in is all tameh. Rav Tav said, Ma Kiva! How can we go? I compare someone tobling the mikvah to a Kohen who's a Ben Gerusha. That whatever he's done until now is kosher. So I say it's tahor. But you compare it to Balmum. So let's see. Lemira, Lemido, but what does it fit in better to? Right? Tameh Keli in mikvah, or what does it compare to? Or Ben Gerusha, let's see, which one is more likely? In the Ben Gerusha, Udaima, Bilmedena. If we think he's more closer to a Kohen who finds out it's Ben Gerusha, we'll learn it from that. I mean, Ben Gerusha, we'll learn from that. In the Balmum Udaima, if you think it's more closely connected to someone who's Balmum, Bilmedena and Balmum, we'll learn from that. Which one makes more sense to compare it? Rabbi Kiva says, Mikvah, the problem is in the mikvah. It's lacking water. Balmum, a blemish, is a problem with him. Psula begufay. So we compare it to him. Ben Grusha has nothing to do with him. It's what happened up there. Because of other people. Because of his mother. And mikveh, psula b'yachid. Mikveh is based on evidence of one person who says, yes, it's not got enough water in. A balmum, psula b'yachid. You can say someone's a blemish with the aid of one. Therefore, we compare mikveh to a Cohen who's got a blemish. And therefore, the being blemish all along, everything is possible, so therefore the kelim are tamei. Don't start comparing to Ben Grusha where you need a basin to suck a din. What's Maskad? I went to Chachamim, I heard what Rabbi Kiva said. Nimnalav, they decided, with Timuhu, they went like Rabbi Kiva and said, everything's tamei. Rabbi Tam and Rabbi Kiva, Akiva! You are so correct. Anyone who leaves you is leaving life. Rabbi Yossi said, Zosei Meres, is there anywhere to start? There's 2 dots at the bottom, is there? Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi, Zosei Meres from this brisa. The psul of a chalal is based on the basin giving a psak, so that we can learn how he's doing avodah, thinks he's fine. But Noida, and then we find out, not through Eidim, Shul Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza, and he carries on doing avodah. Shabbadasik Kashera, Alchi Pasaba Basin. Until he's accepted to Eidim and Basin, he can carry on. So even though he knows he's a chalal, he's still kosher until a Basin Paskin is a chalal. Right? So therefore we learn the suffix when we get to a murderer, B'shogeg, it's Chaim Golos. We find out the Chaim Golos is a chalal. Since at the time when he was Chaim Golos, there was no yet psak on the Basin that Kohen's a chalal, so he's like a Kohen kosher. So therefore the Kohen Gadol at that time is Chaim Golos, and therefore when the Basin Paskin, a Kohen Gadol is a chalal and he stops his Kohuna, it's if he's died, so that's what it should be, it's as if he's died. It's until Basin give the psak, right? And therefore the din of Oseach, he goes back to his place, the murderer is allowed to go back to his town. Hadar Amra, this tells me, where are we? Hadar Amra, this tells me from this brisa, that which we learned, a Kohen who does avodah, and he's got a blemish, even if it's just sofek balmum, a doubt, maybe he's balmum at the time of avodah se psula, is no good. So not only when he knows that he had a balmum when he did the avodah, it's possible, but even if now he finds a balmum, and there's a sofek, maybe he was a balmum at the time of avodah, it's possible. Because you're comparing his din of the one who tovels in the mikveh, which is chaser, right? We compare it lebalmum to a Kohen who's a balmum. Shavodah psula, his avodah is possible. So just like after we find out his balmum, the avodah that he did beforehand is possible. So after you find the mikveh is lacking, any tefillah beforehand is no good. Now, how can we learn someone who tovels in a mikveh which is chaser, right, for later on, from a Kohen who's balmum after avodah? He says, "On mikveh lo safeku." The situation of toveling in the mikveh, which now is lacking, but we don't know for sure when it lost its water, right? We've no idea. It's only a suffix. Maybe it was chaser on the day you dipped the thing in, or maybe it was chaser later on. We don't know. A Kohen who's found out to be a balmum, we know now for sure that he was a balmum all along. But they're not the same. The mikveh we only found out today. The Kohen was a balmum all along. You have to say, in a situation of a Kohen who's a balmum, even if now he's a balmum, where there's a suffix, maybe he was a balmum at the time of the avodah, it's still possible, right? And from here we learn, if you total something in a mikveh and it turns out it's lacking, even though there's only a suffix, maybe it was chaser at the time when you did the dipping, then the one who's total is not tahor from his tumah. You understand? So it's not only a Kohen who's a definite balmum, everything's possible, even a suffix is also possible. Just like you put your mikveh water, your stuff in the mikveh, and it's a suffix, when did the mikveh lose its water? Now, Rav Chanina is the next line. Yeah, one more line. Now the Bryson made a distinction between the psula mikveh and the water based on 1/8, the psula chalal, which needs a basin. Rav Chanina, so it's a mess on the Bryson we learn that psula ben grusha is based on basin. Kol psul mishpacha, any psul in family lineage to negate to the family passes of children. Sorech basin. You need a basin to accept edus and investigate and paskin the din. But as long as it's not paskin and basin, a person is still cheskes kashrus and he's not possible. Okay.